welcome to Dan Ashby's Testing in Agile talk. I have known him for over 5 years.
Something
I think
like
so.
that. Too long.
Yes, we should. And he worked here for 2 years. When did you leave?
You're asking me all hard questions.
I have to.
It was, I think I left about 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Already?
so
No,
something like that.
not that long ago.
It's been 3 companies.
Yeah, since then.
So. That's how I count it now. 3 companies.
So pizza will arrive like 10 minutes before end of the talk. So it is going to be warm. Drinks are there. Please grab your drinks before we start. And then I just over it to you.
Cool, thanks.
Hand over.
Cheers.
Bye.
So I'm going to start with a question. And, well, what is software testing?
Testing of software.
Good answer. But no. What does it mean? What does software testing mean? This is safe. It's going to kind of hopefully be a little bit interactive. I'll pitch some models and stuff on what I think software testing is, and I'll share some stories as well. But I just want to ask this initial question so that I can kind of steer the conversations in specific ways as we go on. So it's safe.
Say if the software does what we think it does.
So software works as expected, does what we think it should do. Okay. What else?
Finding bugs.
Finding bugs. Okay. What else?
Asking questions.
Asking questions. Okay. Anything else? Maintaining quality. Does software testing maintain quality?
In a way.
Okay, I'll accept that. Anything else? Validating design solutions. Ah, that's interesting. I've not heard that one. So usually the most common answers are checking that software meets the requirements and or making sure that software works as expected. And the same kind of if I was to ask what do software testers do? These are sort of like similar answers that most people come to, right? But I'm kind of going to pitch that it's not just these things, because only thinking of these things causes problems. And this is a common problem. Has anyone heard the testing is dead movement? Yeah, and a lot of people saying, oh, automate all the things. Automate, aim for 100% automation coverage. Is that something that people try here?
All the time.
All the time? Wow, okay. So usually I kind of, I'm not going to face palm, don't worry. But usually I kind of, part of my job actually, I should say that I'm at eBay now. As their head of software testing, and I've worked at big companies like AstraZeneca in the pharma industry, and I've worked in the finance industry, and this is a common mindset even in those sort of big old school companies and industries where they're trying to push towards agile and push towards automation. And automation is a great thing, it's essential, but it's only half the testing picture. But to understand testing and where it fits in Agile, we need to think about information. And I kind of, going from pharma sort of industry, the DNA thing, information is kind of the lifeblood of Agile. Would you guys agree or disagree? A few nods. Hard audience, you loosen up a bit. Give me some answers. It's fine to shout out. So I've kind of got this mindset where all software starts with a piece of information. Someone has an idea to maybe solve a problem or to increase revenue or any sort of idea in that for a new feature, but that's a small piece of information. And around that, we try and collaborate. We put processes in place. Like everybody's heard of 3 Amigos, right? Do you guys do 3 Amigos? Yeah, excellent. So 3 Amigos is a great sort of process that you can use for structuring a meeting where you've got people of different backgrounds all collaborating to share ideas. dispel assumptions, and really all these other processes around this sort of stem of an initial idea come into play in order to form various artifacts. We form all this information into artifacts. Everybody works with user stories and epics, right? Cool. So other artifacts are like acceptance criteria or data flow diagrams or risk maps. These are fairly common artifacts to use in an Agile context. And we use those artifacts for lots of different activities within sprints, if we're Scrum, or iterative development processes, and Agile. So development activities like coding, ops activities, testing activities, design, all these sort of things. And then that produces more information and other types of artifacts like the code itself, any sort of documentation that we've got, test cases and test charters, wireframes and feedback information as well from customers. So you can see that information is kind of core. Hopefully this explosive cloud thing model is showing you that information is really important to what we do. It's kind of at the heart, is what I was trying to say earlier. But information has its quirks. So if we think about information, we can really break it down into different types of information, where we have known explicit information. So this is kind of like our expectations that's explicitly written down or verbalized in some way. We've got tacit and implicit information. And tacit information is information where it's very difficult to describe. So thinking about, okay, riding a bike, right? How would you be able to formalize instructions on things like balance? How would you be able to instruct someone to learn things like balance? It's really hard. You can't verbalize that. It's something that they have to experience in order to be able to learn about things like balance for riding a bike. And implicit information is things that we just don't have explicitly. It's implied. It's maybe between the lines that you would have to read to get to that information. But then, of course, we've got unknown information. But we've got two different kinds here. We've got unknown information that we're aware of. So we're aware that we don't know something. And we've got unawareness as well for that unknown information. So we're unaware that we don't know something. So these properties, I promise you, is definitely related to, to testing, but there's more quirks with information as well, which is the 5 orders of ignorance. And the first order is knowledge. It comes back to that stuff that we know. We have the lack of knowledge, which is relating to those states, unknowns. Lack of awareness, when we have an unawareness of those unknowns. But then we've also got lack of process, which is the third order, where we don't have any processes in place to uncover our unknowns. And then we've got a meta-ignorance, which is we're unaware of these 5 orders, and we're unaware of the different states of information itself. So you guys know this now. So you're not meta-ignorant. So what's the relationship between testing and information? In fact, I'm going to ask the question, can anyone have a guess what the relationship might be with testing and information? So what were some of the first answers when I said, what is testing? You said checking that the software meets the expectation, right? So that would relate to that knowledge, having that explicit expectation, right? What about the rest though? What about the unknowns? What about the tacit and implicit information? So we can take this sort of information bar and we can talk about scripted testing through test cases, right? Everyone knows what a test case is. What's a test case? A case for testing? You're just going to throw these answers back at me. Yeah, that's exactly it. Steps, expected results. And then it's a very quantitative pass or fail. You have 100 test cases, you've run 90, 10% have failed, so on and so forth. But it's steps and expectation, pass or fail. But our known information, or explicit information, enables us to write these test cases, right? Enables us to check that expectation. And of course, once we conduct that activity, then we've confirmed that whether that expectation is met or not, right? So that comes back to that initial definition as well. And of course, this can be done by a person or a machine, right, with automation. So the challenge with that initial question, it's a very hard question to answer, what is software testing? But the challenge is most people come from that background where software testing has been known to be test cases from a waterfall sort of methodology where they're asked to confirm a big bunch of specs or requirements that are written in Excel, right, from the dark ages. So most people kind of say that this scripted person side of testing is manual testing, right? And we can automate all that testing. And that's where the testing is dead sort of analogy comes from, right? Which is true, you can automate all your test cases. There's a question of whether there's value to, but anything that you have an expectation for, you can automatically assert that expectation, right? But where the other half of testing comes into play is with using an exploratory approach, right? So this is investigative testing, and it's done through test charters. Does anyone know what a test charter is? No one knows what a test charter is? Okay.
It's when you break whatever you're trying to test into sort of little granular sections.
Possibly, I'm going to give you it. But basically, a test charter is it's ultimately a mission. It's a testing mission to stem and structure your investigative testing, right? So an example, there's a useful template that's commonly used, which is explore a target with resources to discover information. And the words that you would change is target, resources, and information. So ultimately, you could say, I don't know, let's say we've got a login screen. You could say explore the login screen with 100,000 users to discover performance risks, right? So you're thinking about user load there on a login screen. Or you could say explore the same target of a login screen with malicious data types to discover security vulnerabilities. Right? So you could think about the data type that you're using in those fields, SQL injection or cross-site scripting or URL parameter editing, probably, possibly. So the idea is that it's investigation with structure. The test charters give you that structure. Well worth reading up on test charters and session-based test management to learn more about this stuff. But the idea is that our known explicit information and even our tacit and implicit information can inform our test charters and our exploratory testing. And then the purpose of that, we conduct that activity and it uncovers more information, right? So this could be unknowns. It could be tacit and implicit information that we didn't know previously, that we are essentially given more adding more information to give it more clarity. And of course, we can translate all of this into known information. So the idea is, like in here, I think you said that testing is questioning, right? So yeah, you can question a product. You might have an idea about how it might fail based on a specific risk. And you can ask the question of the product through operation and observation and discover an answer. And then that becomes a known, that translates down these sort of blocks into the known category. Once we know that, once we've done that investigation, we can then choose whether we want to script that based on the test cases or automation as well. And I've got this dotted line to essentially think about testing between the noun or a verb. So the noun of testing is the instance where you have a test idea, you're investigating that test idea. Or the verb is the activity, right? So you have the activity of testing. Thinking about the 5 orders, right? That third order was lack of process, right? So testing can be a process and being able to do this, to uncover stuff that we were unaware of. There's an extra couple of lines here, so the scripted testing can also inform our exploratory testing. So if anyone is working with test cases, how many times do you read between the lines? How many times do you say, if it says click the save button, and you look and there's two save buttons, so you try both save buttons. That's still, you're exploring as part of your scripted testing activity. So that definitely informs. And then of course automation. Has anyone heard of the term automation in testing rather than automation testing? No one? So automation in testing is where you're using automation to assist your exploratory testing. So that's kind of where you might use automation to help set up test data or get from A to B to start exploring from point B. Or there's lots of different ways where you might use automation as a tool to assist your exploratory testing. So that's what that means. And then all this fits within context. So context is the key driver to our strategies for overall testing, right? Context consists of our project environments, so whether we're running waterfall or agile, or the people in the team and the team size, and is it distributed or not, and what are the skills that we need or want and have. And then there's the product elements. So this is your domain, right? This is your product. This is all the sort of features that are within there dictate what risks are within the product as well. So that influences our testing strategies and our testing approaches. But you've also got quality criteria as well. So what do the customers and stakeholders care about when it comes to quality, and what does that mean within your context? And like I said before, that check the software meets requirements and make sure the software works as expected is kind of this scripted thing. And that's where the 100% automate everything comes from. But there's a whole host of stuff at the top. So the three approaches are really important: exploratory approach, scripted approach, and automation. And if you're not doing any of these, again, I advise that do some research. I offer kind of a lifetime guarantee for any talks or workshops that I run. So reach out to me and I'll tell you more about all this stuff as well. So when I had that information bar, I've presented this model before, and some of the feedback that I got was, oh, right, that's great, we can go and do that and think about our product now. We can think about testing in a way where we're testing the software using exploratory testing. And that kind of made me think, well, actually, it's not just about testing the software. It's not just about testing developed software. So does anyone work in DevOps? Any teams? Cool, DevOps. I really like DevOps. And this model, I know it's quite a shocking model. It's not very accurate because it's been updated since. But the idea is that potentially we can test everywhere, right? Testing is continuous. When we think about this exploratory testing approach, we can test anywhere, plus extra areas. So this is starting with plan, right? But before plan, we can go all the way back to the idea, right? So when we're thinking about testing the ideas and the requirements, it's an exploratory testing approach, right, that we use. But this is where things like roles get very interesting, right, because this is a full team activity, right? Testers have skills in lateral and critical thinking when thinking about risks and how the product might fail. But everyone has lateral and critical thinking skills about being creative and how to develop the software as well. And everyone has different beliefs and biases and inputs into assumptions even, right? So this is a full team activity of testing the idea, but it's an exploratory testing approach. I hope I'm just giving you language around about stuff that you're hopefully already doing, right? And that's the same with designs and wireframes. So if you've discussed the idea and you're starting to think about the designs of the website or product pages, things like that, you can, even if you just printed out that design and everyone got round a desk or a whiteboard and draw it up on the whiteboard, you can still question and challenge and point out assumptions made as part of the designs as well. right? And that's still an exploratory testing approach. And again, it's the full team that's involved in that. Testing the code. Who does code reviews? I was expecting everyone to put their hand up there. Like 4 people put their hand up. I'm assuming that more people do code reviews. And testers, do you pair with developers doing code reviews? Hopefully, yeah. Cool, so code reviews, yeah, predominantly a developer activity, but still an exploratory approach, right? You're investigating the code. You don't have a script that you're running through to check that things are okay. You might have, in terms of development practices and best practices that are employed within here, right? But you're always going to look at things, asking questions like, how can I write this better so that it's more secure? Or how can I write this better so that it's more testable? Or are we thinking about performance here? How can we refactor this code so that it's more performant? That's part of code reviews, right? Testing the product's the full picture, because you're always going to have expectations, you're always going to have user stories and acceptance criteria that set those shoulds of how the product should work, right? So you're always going to have that sort of scripted side. Yeah, use automation, push that stuff down to unit level if possible, and then you look at the automation triangle for that stuff. But you're always going to have that exploratory testing side as well. There's always going to be stuff that you don't know. And that's where the big problems are. That's where you have to investigate for different types of risks. And I tend to talk about different types of risks rather than different types of testing, because in my head, a type of testing is testing that focuses on a type of risk. So regression testing is just testing that focuses on the risks of regression, right? Performance testing focuses on performance risks. Accessibility testing focuses on accessibility risks. But if I was to ask you to name how many types of testing are there, maybe we'd get to about 20, 25. You're looking at me saying, oh, I'd get 5. Or 3, the ones I've just listed. But if we think about different types of risks, there's over 100 different types of risks relating to software, right? So, and we'd start listing them off left, right, and centre, right? So that's where thinking about the risk rather than thinking about a type of testing is much, much more effective when it comes to generating ideas about how things might fail. If that makes sense. I don't know if you guys are doing a lot of this already. And of course we can test our processes, right? This is probably the biggest thing that most people don't actually do. But people complain about processes. I complain about processes every day. But when do we ever all sit down and say, right, let's test our processes here. Let's figure out what the problems actually are and get to some of the root causes, and then we can stem some actions to sort these processes out. But we all have problems with processes. We'll always continue to have problems with processes because, remember, we can't think of everything. If we could, then everything would be perfect, right? So process is a big one. So the relationship with the 5 orders, I'm just going to fly through this. I've explained this already. So knowledge, it's our explicit information, which we can assert through test cases or automation. Lack of knowledge, this is where we are aware that we don't know something, but we know that we can ask the question and we can investigate and we can uncover that information. A lack of process, so this is the things that we're unaware of, unaware that we don't know. But if we put processes in place, 3 Amigos is a great start for that. But if we just think about using an exploratory approach for whole team testing activities and put that process in place and thinking about risks, then we'll uncover more unknowns and become aware of them, and then we can question them and investigate them to see if there's a problem. Lack of process. So I've kind of skipped ahead. That's what I was talking about there. Put the exploratory testing process in place to become aware. And then meta-ignorance. Here I'm kind of talking about fluency and talking about testing, right? And promoting good testing, right? So I'm classing that as a sort of meta-ignorance problem, because a lot of testers that I speak to in the industry, I'd say even 85-90% of testers are still in the test case mindset, right? I don't know if you guys are going through hiring or whatnot, but if you're looking for new testers or even new developers, ask them about testing. Talk to them about testing. Talk to them about that mindset of investigation, not just about asserting an expectation. And this is the part that's testing as a noun and testing as a verb, which is quite interesting. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But again, we can't think about everything. It's impossible. So, in Agile, what's Agile? I'm going to wait for an answer. But safe, remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. What do you think Agile is?
The ability to move quickly.
The ability to move quickly, okay. Anything else? Responding to change, yeah. Anything else? Iterative, okay. Anything else? Continuous delivery.
A way of doing something.
A way of doing something, okay. Yeah, all good answers. A common answer is speed. And when I first started at AstraZeneca, which was my previous company to eBay, it was very much, we're undergoing this agile transformation. We want people to work quicker. And then it was like, I joined just as a few agile coaches joined, and we were all like, no, it's really not about working quicker. Working quicker is quicker releases is a byproduct of Agile, but it's not the purpose of Agile. The purpose of Agile is because there's a realization that we don't know everything. So it is responding to change, right? It's agility. That's what Agile is about, is agility, right? So it feels as if within Agile, within the context of Agile, this exploratory testing approach is actually really relevant. But unfortunately, not very many people have got a focus on learning about this exploratory approach. So I'm hoping that I'm giving you guys some stuff like the model to use to be able to factor this into your thinking within the teams as well. But also to kind of talk about it to other teams and companies as well, if you go to conferences and stuff. And a lot of people say Agile testing is this big new thing, but Agile testing is just testing in Agile, right? It's just testing in the context of Agile. Remember, context is about your project environment and your product domain and quality criteria, right? So your project environment is that you're working in an Agile context, and testing is the same, whether it's that same mindset whether it's Agile or not. There's just nuances based on how you're working in the process of Agile, right? So I'm going to tell a story about a red button, which ties into unknowns and investigation, and it's quite a funny story as well. I think you've heard this story before. I don't know about anyone else. So I used to live in Shanghai. I lived there for a year. My wife got offered a job when she graduated, and this was before the big financial crash in, when was it, 2007? 2008, something like that. So we moved out there about 2007. It's a long time ago, actually, thinking about it. This is my wife, Amanda, just so you can put a face to the name. So when she moved out 2 weeks before I moved out, and her work put us up in this nice, fancy apartment, actually. But when I arrived, she had got all the apartment ready and livable, and it was all nice, kitted out and stuff. And I dumped my bags, I sat on the couch, and then I saw it. Do you see it? The red button. So it was behind the TV, next to some power sockets, about this high off the ground. So straight away, I jumped up and I was like, what's this button? And I was just about to press it, and she slapped my hand out of the way, and she said, it's red, it means bad, so don't press the button, right? So I was like, okay, right, I don't want to get into trouble. I'm jet lagged. I'm just going to try and just relax and not think about this button. But that's all I could see from sitting on the couch. That's all I could see. Here's a zoomed up version. So it was kind of rubber textured because I was trying to investigate without pressing the button, trying to figure out what it did. There was a tiny little hole I tried to put a paper clip in, but it wouldn't fit. But I didn't press the button. That was the only rule I wasn't allowed to press. So, but how do you test a button without being able to press it? Right. So this is going back to testing the idea, right? So I don't have. It's as if I don't have a physical button. I do in front of me, but I'm not allowed to press it. So it's like I don't have a physical button. But trying to discover, think about ideas about what it could be for. And it took about 24 hours for me to actually press the button, because it took 24 hours for my wife to leave to go to the shop. So the second that she left, I waited about 10 seconds to make sure that she wasn't going to come back in, and then I was straight over and I pressed the button. And nothing happened. So I was going through everything that I had in my head of what it could be for. Is it related to the power socket? No, the power socket's still working. Is it related to the TV? No, the TV's still on. Is it related to lights? No, nothing's happening. It was like that. Anyone watch Friends? Remember Friends when they found the light switch that they didn't know what happened? It was very much like that, where I was trying to listen to the floor, underfloor heating. No, nothing like that. So really, I was just feeling really deflated at that point. I was like so disappointed that nothing happened with this button. So then, because when I pressed it, it went into the wall, I tried to unpress it so that it wasn't noticeable that I'd pressed it. But it wouldn't unpress, it was stuck in the wall. So my emotions quickly changed from being on a downer for not knowing what the button was to panicking because I was going to get my ass kicked from my wife for pressing the button when she told me not to. So curiosity got the better of me, and of course pressing the button, but then not knowing what the button was for was really disappointing. No light went on, no noise, no heat or aircon, nothing happened to the TV, and it's stuck in the wall, and Amanda's going to kill me. And then about 5 minutes later, there was a rattling on the door, and I opened the door and it was the police, and I was like, oh no, like Amanda's in trouble, like what's happened? And I tried to invite them in, and they pushed past me. And actually one of them brought a baton out. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a kicking with the police in this apartment. And they were shouting really angrily. And of course they are speaking in Mandarin. They don't understand a word that I'm saying. I don't understand a word that they're saying. And there was two of them, like a young guy that was really big, and then a wee small guy that was quite old. And the wee small guy was really angry, and the young guy was just like taking a back step and following this guy's lead. And he pushed me out of the way, and he walked straight over to the red button. He's pointing and screaming, and I was like, yes, I know what the button's for. It's a panic button. So while I had arms in air, they looked really confused. And of course, they checked all the rooms, gave me into trouble, and were looking for some sort of explanation. And the first thing that I could think of was I saw one of these fluffy dusters, and I picked up and it was pretending that I was cleaning, and I accidentally pressed the button. And of course, waving this thing around, both of them just started laughing, and then he pulled out a really long, thin copper wire, pushed it into that tiny little hole, and the button popped out. So I was like, double win, I'm not going to get into trouble anymore. So then off they went, and then I was like, right, I know what this button's for, but is this good enough? Right? I was testing the idea of a button again after being able to press the button, where I was then challenging the outcome of 5 minutes is a long time, right? If I'm being attacked in a flat, I want them to respond sooner, right? 5 minutes is a long time to wait for something like this, considering that they weren't that far away from the building, the security office. And also, why is a button in this place? Right, that's a really awkward place to get to. If I'm being attacked, I'm not going to go, hold on a minute till I reach behind the TV and press this panic button. That's not going to make any sense. Why isn't it in the bedroom at night time? If I'm going to be attacked at night time, that's where I'm going to be, or in the bathroom where that's the only room with a lock, right? Why is there no documentation about this button? This is a cool feature in this flat. It does have a panic button, but no one knows no one's ever going to know what it's for unless they've seen something like this before, right? And it's a really unintuitive position. So is this good enough? So yeah, that's just some ideas around unknowns and how investigating the idea and all that sort of stuff. It's hard, it's very challenging, but it's essential. We have to do this with our products. We have to. So I usually, at the end of talks, have a key takeaways, but I've changed this recently to be more my challenge. My challenge to you is, if you're not already doing so, try incorporating exploratory testing, an exploratory approach, and alongside an automation approach as well to your testing if you're not already doing so. And I've flown through my slides so that we can grab some pizza. Any questions? Oh, thanks. Any questions?
Did you press it again?
No, but I did try and get my wife to press it. It was really funny because she had no interest in pressing it at all, right? And actually, I did a lot of research into like why, the psychology behind why I was curious and she wasn't. And I actually found a curiosity gene called DRD47R. So I was thinking, curiosity is testing, right? And if people are curious in software, does that mean that the software is going to be better? But then she was just like, it's context. She threw context right back at me because she's really interested in other things and she will investigate all of them. Like she works in fashion actually. She works as a knitwear designer for a manufacturer. And anything fashion related or stuff like that, she's on it. She's investigating it. She's researching it, and I'm not interested in any of that stuff. So I wouldn't really be bothered if it was a button that said something to do with fashion on it. I would just I'm not worried about it because it was a shiny red button. But no, I didn't press it again. No. Now that I knew what it was for, I didn't feel as if there was a need. But there are risks there that I could investigate. Does it work a second time? No, she didn't. I thought that she did, and that's why she wasn't curious, but she genuinely didn't. But she just saw red as being danger. So steer clear of danger, which is kind of true.
Were you staying in a dodgy area?
No, no. In Shanghai, Shanghai is an amazing city, but basically what they do is they build these sky-high flats in areas that were full of poverty. So there's still sort of shanty towns around about, but they've got security guards and all that sort of stuff as well. And it was actually a really safe place, but I think it was just a thing that they wanted to throw in flats to make people feel safe. Yeah, it was interesting.
So, a more serious question. How do you sort of time box how much exploratory testing?
So this is where session-based test management comes into play, because you still work with test charters, but you time box your testing sessions, right? So typically a test session might be anything between 15 minutes and an hour and a half. But the idea is that that's uninterrupted. So in the same way that you have uninterrupted coding sessions, you might put your headphones in and tell people don't disturb me while I'm in this. My head's in this space. Testers should do the same, and developers should do the same with their testing as well, if it's an exploratory testing concept. And it's the same way with things like planning meetings and their 3 Amigo meetings that you have, right? They're typically time boxed as well. The idea is how much is enough. If you get to the end of that session and you realise there's still a whole host of stuff that needs covered, then you can set more charters, you can set up more testing sessions there as well, and just manage it that way. The hard thing is if you're trying to collect metrics, because if you try and say, I have 10 test charters for this user story, and I've done 6 of them, the 7th might generate another 4, right? So it throws your metrics are a point in time sort of stat, and they could change at any time. But that's the same with everything, right? The idea of the software could change at any time. A new feature can come along in your sprint, if it's Scrum that you're using, and cause other stuff to drop out, right? I think you had a question?
Hello? Okay.
Hi.
Bit of a selfish question, but is there any way that people working in the product space, like product owners or product managers, can contribute to like a positive testing culture?
Yeah, definitely. So at eBay, some of the product managers they actually are the ones that have understood this kind of exploratory investigation side of things, and they've used that kind of approach when they're talking to their customers as well. They're questioning, they're trying to uncover information. And at eBay, long before I joined, they were some of the key people for influencing that within the development side. It was them that had been to the Agile conferences and heard testers speak about it and bring it back into the company to have the Agile teams start collaborating on exploratory testing as well. And then they brought in some good testers to be able to support that, right? But yeah, definitely. I think when I talk about an Agile team, a product manager or a product owner is part of that team as well, right?
What strategy would you recommend for maintaining testing documentation about a specific product that we are testing?
Cool. So specifically testing documentation, or any? So a lot of teams use Jira. Do you still use Jira here? Yeah. So Jira has some great plugins for session-based test management tools. Allows you to create charters and manage your testing notes within that. And the same way that they're now integrating a lot of automation tools with Jira as well. So there's Cucumber and BDD tools that plug in. BDD isn't about automation. It's not actually a testing tool. It's a collaboration tool, but an output of that is feature files, which is an input to automation, right? So these tools can be used in that way with an automation approach. And of course, the output of that automation then plugs back into the Jira tool as well, so that's quite useful. And of course, with a tool like that, you can set up dashboards and all that sort of stuff, monitoring stuff as well. So, but with the reporting side, with the exploratory testing, it's less about it being quantitative. It's much more about it being qualitative. So if you think about the investigation side as being more like an investigative news reporter, a journalist, right, who hears a small piece of information about a news story, and then they go hunting to find out more information, they investigate, and then at the end of it, they produce a news report, right, a news article, right, for a newspaper, for example. Testing notes are very much like that. Some people use mind maps, some people use chronological text-based time-stamped notes. But the idea is that you're telling a testing story about the perceived quality from that investigation. Your discoveries, good and bad, not just bugs, but ideas, or if something is actually really good, you should highlight that, right? But I prefer mind maps for that sort of stuff because you can use colours and icons, and it's less words, and it's more sort of images and easier to interpret. I find images and models easier to work with than words. I don't know, I'm a lazy reader. Any more questions? Yep.
I think earlier you mentioned as part of automation testing, there's something called automation testing N, which is one of the exploratory testing techniques.
Oh yeah, automation in testing.
Yes, automation.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you elaborate a bit more on it? I think one of the steps you said, one of the techniques was like randomized test data. I think you can pass this.
Yeah. So when people think of automated testing is a common term, or automation testing. People think about things like the automation triangle. They think about unit tests or integration tests or end-to-end tests. But ultimately, the most common thing that they think about is asserting something, right? So asserting that expectation, right, of how the software should work, which is what unit tests do, for example, right? Just at code level, you're asserting an expectation. But what I mean by automation in testing is where you might have an automation script that doesn't assert anything. You might use it to assist your investigation, your exploratory testing, in the way where you might create data, right? Now that could be an automation script that creates data through your actual database, or it could be an automation script that uses APIs or whatnot to generate data that way, HTTP requests. Or it could be automation that you're actually driving through the UI to generate that data. You could use a mix and match, depending on what your purpose is and the value of doing different ways. But the concept of automation in testing is to use automation to assist your exploratory testing. If you're looking to learn more about it, read anything from Richard Bradshaw or Mark Winteringham. Two of them have coined the term automation in testing and speak a lot about that. Mark's more of a sort of, from the API perspective, testing APIs, using automation in testing and tooling, and Richard's kind of more an overall generalist. Yep.
So, really important that developers test as well.
Yep.
Where do you see kind of the line where developers end their testing and then pass it over to dedicated testers?
That depends on context. Again, in eBay, everything's paired. So there is no line. A tester will pair with a developer while they're writing code and while they're doing exploratory testing. It's a joint activity. But the reason that we have two different people with the different skills is because we recognise that both people have trained for years in their industry to get the skills that they've got in their domains, right? And both people have different perspectives and both people have different mindsets and beliefs and biases that they'll naturally bounce off each other, right? The hard thing is that it's more of a people challenge if someone doesn't want to pair or doesn't understand it, or if there isn't that relationship and connection with people pairing, then that's where the challenge is with pairing, right? But then you can try things like mobbing, right? So that's where a full Agile team might mob together on one user story all the way through from, it might start from the idea phase, or it might start from once you have a user story and you're picking it up in a sprint to start the sort of code design all the way through to potentially its release if you go that far, or in the bucket where it's ready to release at the end of the sprint. You can mob from that perspective, and I've done that before in other companies as well. And that worked really well. We had different roles, and we continuously rotated people around every 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, depending on the team size. But the roles were, someone was a driver on the keyboard, there was a navigator giving a verbal commands to the driver on what they've to do. We had someone on a whiteboard that's generating mind maps on a whiteboard for ideas, where we could go next. There was someone taking testing notes using mind map format. And we were also following the test charters as well. And everyone else was essentially the brain, and they would pitch ideas to the navigator, and then the navigator would decide whether it was something to move on to next or an idea to write up on the board, so that we were aware of all that sort of stuff. And it worked really well, but again, we had one or two people in the team that didn't really want to mob, but quickly people saw the benefits, and then they got involved and ended up enjoying themselves. And we gamified it a little bit as well. We had lots of different prizes and stuff like that for the different roles, and that worked quite well.
So, Ashby, do you have sort of an equal number of testers in the team?
No, again, it's just preference. So I've worked in places where for every 2 developers we've had 1 tester, and that's worked quite well. At eBay we've got very small Agile teams. We've got between 3 and 5 developers, a designer, a product owner, and 1 or 2 testers. Typically it's 1 tester in a team, but typically we've got 3 developers in that team with 1 designer and 1 product owner. And that works really well because everybody's just very collaborative, all the way from the initial idea. When someone in the business says, look, we've got this idea, we collect those ideas, and then that's when we all start those 3 amigo conversations all the way through. And we work in Kanban as well, so it's just a continuation of prioritising and picking up work. We do still have ceremonies though, and we do run them in either weekly or twice weekly or every 2 weeks. And we do still have stand-ups, but it's not Scrum in the sense of we're pulling all these set amount of user stories in for these 2 weeks. That part of it's just continuous. But trial, play around with it, test your processes, find out what works for you. If you find that one tester is being effective, but you think you might benefit from having a second tester or even a third tester, trial that. There's nothing. Hopefully, you've got that environment here where you're able to trial things for maybe a sprint or two, and then see how it works out, right? Because that's how we improve things. That's how Toyota came up with things like Kanban, right? Because essentially they used lateral thinking and said, everybody get all their ideas out on the table, let's trial them, and then pick the one that works best, right? And that mindset goes a long way. Any more questions? Cool.
Pizza time.
Nice. Thanks. Some beer. Thanks.
Good job, mate. Is this off?